Hello and welcome to another Procurement Conversation, where our panel tackles the big issues facing procurement. I'm Rich Sains and I'm joined by regular panellist Kirsty Carr, and this week we're delighted to be joined by Mirko Kleiner, co-founder of Flowdays and the president of the Lean-Agile Procurement Alliance. Now, over the last couple of years, business has been speeding up, but procurement is getting more and more bogged down with additional process work. And getting slower isn't an option, so how can we speed up procurement? And that's the question we're tackling in this week's episode. And one way to approach this is through Lean-Agile procurement. And now, Mirko, can you give us an introduction to yourself and talk us through what Lean-Agile procurement is?
Yeah, thanks, Rich, and hi, Kirsty, and the whole audience. A big pleasure to be here. So maybe first things first, most important things first, I'm not a procurement professional. I have my roots in software, where all the Agile movement is coming from. And yeah, I used to run my own software sourcing company, so I know the supplier side quite well. Moved then ahead to Agile coaching. So I've co-founded Flowdays, which is an Agile consultancy over here in Switzerland and Germany. And we are all about business agility. So how can we get more agile, more flexible to changing market demands? And on our journey, we got in touch with procurement now 7 years back, and they said, "Well, it's amazing what you're doing. What with our support is possible now in delivery and innovation and so on. What's in it for us?" And we said, "We have no clue. What are you guys doing?" And I told them the story, being an ex-software supplier, where we often have, project requests, RFPs, if you will, where the customer not really knows exactly what they really want until they see it, which then is a pain in the ass for the vendors to come up with a proposal. So we concluded there is kind of a lose-lose situation if things become complex and uncertain. And so we took that as an opportunity, and we started with the hypothesis. Imagine your most complex sourcing case, often strategic sourcing cases, and you just have one day to close the deal and sign the contract. What will you do? And out of this stupid, or some call it a powerful question, a whole movement, a whole approach, Lean-Agile procurement evolved. And now companies in all industries, even all categories, from private and public sector, start to apply it, and with great success. So how can you achieve it? I mean, maybe if you just take one thing away, is this: what if you have just one day? We need the right people, right? So procurement is no more enough. So we need the business people, we need the people from IT if it's an IT case, we need the vendors, the pre-selected vendors, we need decision takers, and hopefully we don't forget the customer or the end user of the system, the service, or whatever it is. And we need to find out together, right? And come to a decision as soon as possible. So that's a bit in a nutshell what we are doing. It's more complex, but
so it's always, I guess, bringing together the right stakeholders at the right point, and getting everyone in a sort of a mindset of making decisions and sort of, moving things forward, rather than trying to sort of kick the can down the road as long as possible. Because I think we were saying earlier, if you've got benefits, usually the things that we're working on in procurement, there's some sort of benefits, a benefit to the customer, a benefit to the business, benefit cost saving. Actually, the quicker that we can implement that, the better. And if we're taking 9 to 12 months to run a sourcing process, actually all we're doing is delaying that benefit. And if we're not getting benefits for something, then why are we doing it, I suppose? But
so the key word that becomes more and more important, not just in procurement, by the way, is time to market. So cost savings, I mean, cost is still important. I mean, we have some conditions, commercial conditions, right? So we can't spend more than X. There is a budget or a business case or an assumption or whatever. So we need to be within these boundaries, but often time to market is really more important. And I think that's one of the first big mind shifts, because just imagine if you could introduce a new tool, a new service, a new whatever it is, much faster than your competitors, then this might make millions in a difference, right? And it's not about could we have it 10% less or something.
Well, and I think we saw it during COVID. I saw there's always this case study of Lint in Canada, where just before Valentine's Day they shut the shops. I think maybe just before Easter they shut all the shops, and so they had to have an e-commerce solution, and they didn't have anything. So they were able to source and implement something in 5 days. And you think if they hadn't done that, they might say, well, there's all this process stuff, and we've got to go through a 6-month process or whatever. But then they would just not have made any money for 6 months. So yeah, that's definitely the way that I guess COVID as well has sort of helped to reevaluate people's idea there. So what's the ingredients of a great Lean-Agile project for you?
Yeah, so we Lean-Agile procurement it's not a process, it's nor a checklist or something, it's more of a framework. So it's abstract, and because every case is different, we can then apply it to this specific context. I'll give you an example. Recently we sourced an ERP system in just 4 weeks. And what we did to achieve that was, in the first step, and that's step 1 in our approach, is in our framework, is we are setting up a cross-functional team that operates in an agile way. Some of you might be familiar with Scrum, so that's our operating model. So procurement is part of that team, but also the business is part of that team. And if it's in our case, it was kind of weird. So we had people from IT for an ERP, obviously, but also people from accounting and finance and so forth in that team, because they know the best what they needed, right? And so we took them on the journey, not just for the sourcing, that became an agile team, a cross-functional team for delivery as well, so that we don't have these handovers after the sourcing anymore, and the guys that will be responsible in delivery usually look back and say, hey, what the heck have you sourced here? We can't use that, or what's that kind of a partner, and so on. So we want to have this ownership from the start. So this is another big mind shift. And then this team, and that's the beauty of it, runs through the usual sourcing steps, right? So they question themselves, do we really need that step or not? And so if there is a market research needed, we do a market research, selection criteria. Yeah, let's do that. Let's craft a contract. And if we have a lawyer in the team, we can do that in several hours, right? So that's no more of a big challenge. And just having the right people together then speeds things up quite nicely. So in our case, an ERP system is quite complex, right? So we needed to take care of what are the process, what are the technical integrations, and all these things that makes it complex. And so we did several workshops that were organized by the teams with the end users. So we invited people from payroll, from HR and whatever, and asked them for their needs. So solution independent needs. We talked about with the internal IT guys, what are the interfaces? What are, what's the system environment, the architecture and everything. And then, so up till now, it's not so, let's say, super fancy. I've seen traditional procurement organizations that worked in project teams for more complex cases. But where it's really different is the team comes up with a short list of potential partners and solutions, obviously. And then we invite them, the shortlisted vendors, virtual or in person, all simultaneously. Why is that important? We want to co-create the solution, their proposal, and even in a best case, even improve a draft of a contract together with them. So in the ERP case, we spent 2 days with 3 vendors. And after the 2 days, we signed the contract. The delivery team was expanded by the vendor, and they were just ready to start or continue delivery. So during the 2 days, you don't have to, but in this case, it made a lot of sense. We even run a proof of concept, and we gave them, some of the most critical needs and challenges, and say, hey, could you show us how you would solve that? Or if it's just configuration, just do it. We want to see it, right? And could really test how a collaboration will feel. And in parallel, we dealt about the commercials, the timing, the contract, and so forth. So that's in a very nutshell, right? So it's a very collaborative approach. And 4 weeks was actually, it could have been done in 2 weeks or even less, because the project team just had 2 days a week together as a team to work on this case. So there's a huge potential just giving such a team focus. So there's nothing to do with Agile, just having focus, just one task on my table. It's as simple as that.
Is there a bit about empowerment as well, I suppose, from...
Absolutely, yeah. So we usually start with a kickoff where we invite obviously the team members, but also all the key stakeholders. In this case, and it's often the case, it's multiple departments and stakeholders and so forth. And we usually spend, depending on the case, up to 1 day just getting an alignment, right? So what are the business objectives? What are the constraints? What's the budget? What's the timing? Just, all these, let's say, ground rules. And then everybody knows, right? It's transparent. And we don't have this competing politics and so forth, because everybody was involved. Yeah. At least everybody important, yeah.
And do you have to miss anything out of the process? Is it something that, do you find that you managed to cover off everything, or do you have to strip stuff out?
Yeah, so as I said, so we start with the initialization, which is basically setting up this team, having a kickoff, then preparation, which is just do everything needed that you do to come to a shortlist, invite the shortlisted vendors and come to an agreement, and then start to continue delivery. It's as simple as that. The difference is definitely also on the culture side. So it's less of a us and them attitude. It's more inclusive. We are really looking for a true partnership. And also what is interesting, applying Agile values like trust and openness and honesty and commitment and so forth, the negotiations in quotes turn into very different, we call them commercial conversations. So we obviously, if we have several competitors in the same room, we are not yet there that we could talk openly and transparent between the competitors. So usually those are conversations in private rooms. But we ask questions like, what of our objectives? What of our constraints? What of our needs make it complicated to you? What do we need to change to become more efficient, more effective? What risks do you see? What concerns do you have that that drives costs or whatever? And so sometimes even the business case changes just because of the input by the vendors. So this collaborative approach is super powerful. And so in average, we have 400% improved time to market comparing to traditional approaches. So you spoke about 6 to 12 months. So that's also our experience, for complex sourcing cases. And we have weeks, sometimes days instead. what is interesting is because we are focused, so business value is always in focus. You might call that outcome-based sourcing, right? So in Agile, business value is all over. So we prioritize even business objectives. We prioritize all the needs. We know exactly from first hands from the users what are the really must-haves, what are the nice-to-haves. And so we also try to put focus on the scope, which is, it's much more, if you source just the right things, it's much more cheaper than sourcing all the wants and the wishes and so forth. So from our experience, we have a potential for savings, which is not in our focus at all, to be honest. Time to market is much more important, but we recognize the potential for savings for up to 80%.
Wow.
And so by de-scoping and adding focus. And then maybe last but not least, a number that might be interesting is the satisfaction. So we track the satisfaction, internal satisfaction, so stakeholder, users, customers, but also project team, but also from the vendors that we invite in that process. And we have an average satisfaction that is 9 out of 10. So even the vendors that didn't make it appreciate it a lot and say, hey, can we do that every time like this? Because it's much less effort. We much better understand. And sometimes we even make fun out of the selection process. We ask the vendors the very final question, who do you think made it? And it's just obvious because if you are 2 days in the same room, no matter virtual or in person, you realize those guys are better, they have a better solution, and so forth. So even also much less of this, concerns, will we get sued and so forth.
Do you find that suppliers are happy to do that, to actually sort of show their whole solution in front of a competitor and get involved in that collaborative process? I mean,
yes and no. It's a difficult topic, especially if you have something very unique and it's your USP and so the briefing becomes super important because first of all we want to make sure that they show up at all, right? That they show up with the right people. So they still could come with their sales crew and pre-sales consultants, but we are in particular interested in the people that we might work with, right? So that we could kind of, as somebody recently named it, like it's like a speed dating before you get married, right? which I like a lot,
isn't it? It's do we have chemistry? Can we work well together?
Exactly. Because you would not be invited if you don't believe you have a good solution, right? Or a good service or whatever, good product. So it's also about that. And so the briefing becomes important, and we make that a topic. Do you have things that you want to protect your intellectual properties? Can we talk openly about that? And if so, then we just have that in private rooms, right? Those kind of conversations, and that solves 99% of the problems. In the ERP case, to make it a bit more actionable, it has been 3 solution providers from the same product, so there was no need for that. So they even shared the intermediate results of the proof of concepts and could even help each other. And then we ask them, it's a bit weird that you help each other. I mean, at least 2 of them, they kind of collaborated, and we immediately asked them because we noticed that and said, today we are competitors, tomorrow we are partners again, right?
Yeah. So were they SIs then implement? Because so we've got a comment that's come up, I guess, just to understand a bit more information about the ERP case, because so this is the So yeah, I guess the sort of comment around, making sure, and I suppose it depends a lot on the type of organization you're in, whether they're open to that, getting the right stakeholders aligned. But so was that a smaller company with an ERP, or was that a larger company? Obviously, no, you can't necessarily talk about specifics.
Well, I mean, the case is public. You can look it up on Lean-Agile procurement.com. So the company that was looking for a new ERP was a mid-sized company, Swiss casinos. But the vendors, they have been, on different size. They were a huge, a very huge company, but also small and SMEs that were pitching. Okay. So all the sizes, yeah.
Great. And we've got another one just here from Anthony as well. He's asked a question. Mm-hmm. So can this work in all categories, or is it, particular categories that work better? And are suppliers happy if they've got something very complex they need to be getting across? Is that enough time for them to present their case?
Yeah. So please don't take great questions. Please don't take the 2 days for granted. So the approach is really depending on the context. So we have had cases where we spent 4 days, and we have had cases where there was a preferred supplier. We spent just 1 hour. Right.
Yeah.
So it's really scalable depending. I mean, if you have a budget of 100K, you don't want to have 50 people for 4 days in a room. It costs more than the case, right?
Yeah.
So we need to scale that. To the question of Anthony, does it work for all categories? I would say yes, in general. There are definitely cases like IT, software, all the indirect procurement cases where you usually have more complex cases, I would say. It's just my observation as a non-procurement professional. But more and more we get also requests from direct sourcing cases where it goes more into innovation, right? So they say, well, there are, this is kind of a product, right, that we directly could source, but we want to go 2 steps beyond that. So let's go into a co-creation and so forth. And then again, it becomes complex, uncertain, and so forth. So the magic word is complex, right? So recently we had a case with the biggest brewery in the world, and they were looking for new partners for facility management. And I said, sorry guys, wrong request. This is not complex, right? And they said, well, you're right. It's not the case itself is complex, but we have more than 1,000 sites all over the place, and it's a multi-vendor sourcing case. So we have an organizational complexity. I have no clue how to deal with that. And so we decided, let's start in an agile way. And then maybe in a later stage, we could go fall back to, now we have solved all the complexity, and we could continue in a traditional way. So it's also not religious, right? So,
yeah. What's the best piece of feedback you've received about a project you've undertaken?
Yeah, there is one of my preferred feedback is from Air France, and there it actually was the sponsor. He said, traditionally we were pre-selecting vendors and solutions, and then we got this paperwork back and forth. We did the pitch, and we selected them based on some criteria. But now we had the vendors, the pre-selected vendors in the same room, and we gave them the chance with early feedback and co-learning to improve their solution, and so the proposals, and at the end we could take the best of it. And that's kind of the essence of what we are doing. It's not just here are the specs, give us a proposal, this transactional nature, But that's not saying that's wrong. That's very, very fine, in the commodity space. But if things become complex, you have a lot of room of interpretation and misunderstandings and uncertainty and risks and so forth.
Okay. Oh,
you're on mute, Kirsty.
It might be your microphone's there. And it's gone mute now.
I'm back. Yeah, sorry. There's a lot of DIY going on around me, so it's super easy. When I think about being lean and agile for procurement, there were 3 areas that really stand out to me, and that's systems, processes, and people, because they can all be improved. And when I think about systems, and we talked about this before we came on, it seems to me that in some businesses, the larger the business, we have different sources of truth, we have different systems, we have different pockets of the business that know something about what we want to source. And the pre sort of qualification or the pre-tender sort of section is really, it's very long-winded. It takes a lot to get people involved. It takes a lot to get people engaged. And for me, the opportunity would be finding a way to really cut down the noise in that space and having a really simple process, like you said, and using things like risk criteria, which we do as a discipline anyway in procurement. But then what do we actually use it for? Are we using it just from a financial basis, or are we using it to do de-risk when we go out to do projects? So kind of interested to hear your views on sort of those 3 areas and where you think there would be improvements. I mean, a lot of it starts with us and being brave and wanting to change.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a people thing in the end as well, right? So because I always say, the process and the systems and the system, the organization as a system, if you will, they were designed for a good purpose. So it's not that, is everything shit and why are we doing that? But we also got tired to question sometimes, why are we working like we are supposed to work? And is this really applicable in this case? And you mentioned a very interesting one is, all this noise, we are involved in too many projects. So in our trainings that we do, we have an exercise where we ask the participants, in how many tasks, projects, and duties are you simultaneously involved? And there is some empirical data around it. So majority of it is in 5 and more simultaneously involved in procurement. And it's nothing special, it applies the same to almost every employee, I would say, in other functions as well. Now, the downside is, based on this empirical data, we know if you are involved in 5 projects simultaneously, your efficiency per project is down to 5% of your available time. So you're wasting 75% of your whole time with content switching and so forth. So no matter if you're working agile or not, the best we can do to help people in procurement and speed up things is creating focus. So that's the conversation I start with leaders in procurement. Say, do you have transparency what cases we are working at simultaneously? Which one is more important than the other, and so forth. As stupid as that, and obviously procurement can't decide, so they need to start to involve the business in this conversation, and suddenly you are in a portfolio discussion, which often procurement is not at this table, right? Much often, so yeah, just a little hint. I mean, what we do, and I mean, it's much easier as an external, obviously. We don't start with Lean-Agile procurement until we get 2 days a week availability of all the core team members. We don't start
Right.
because we need this minimum level of focus. Otherwise, we are in the same trap. as we are today. It's the same with alignment. So we do a kickoff with the key stakeholders where we define outcome of this case, where we define the boundaries. What's the budget? As stupid as that. Are there some technical, some functional constraints and so forth? And often it happens that the key stakeholders, the sponsor, they say, well, we don't have time. I say, well, then we don't start. Because without a clear direction, it really happened. I once, big insurance over here in Switzerland, I had a board member who was the sponsor, and he said, well, but we wrote it down in the business case and the team knows it, and why should I show up? I said, please show up just 15 minutes in the kickoff. Could you free up your time 15 minutes? I said, well, yeah, okay, 15 minutes. And I asked him to present the case and the vision and where he thinks things should develop to. And then I asked the team, so what have you understood in the paper, and does that match to what you now heard? And they said, well, without hearing it firsthand, we understood to run in that direction, and what he's talking about, running in that direction.
Yeah.
So very important.
Yeah, that alignment's really key. I think the point you make there about, it's batching up certain activities into, spend a couple of weeks on this and a couple of weeks on another thing, rather than trying to do 10 projects over 10 weeks. It's like
there is another analogy that I usually bring up to not just CPOs, chief procurement officers, but also other leaders in the business and board members and such. And say, imagine procurement is kind of your investor. So imagine the business case for this sourcing case is worth it to spend 100 million. Okay. Now imagine you would invest 100 million in a startup, because we are in uncertain areas. It's complex. We don't know. We have a lot of assumptions, but we don't know the truth. Would you ever spend 100 million at once into a startup? Obviously not. But that's exactly what we are doing in procurement, right? We try to mitigate risk the way we specify everything down to the details to mitigate risk. Now, this worked nicely if we knew the outcomes and we knew the solution and everything, so commodity. But in complex, we need to make procurement iterative.
Yeah.
So we might spend 1 million or 10 millions, depending on the case, and again create focus to our most promising hypothesis and expected outcomes first. And then, because now it became so easy, in quotes, to source, again, we will just redo it in 3 months, right? And review, is this the right partner still? Is this the right product still, service, whatever it is? Do we need to switch? Do we need to extend? And so the whole sourcing becomes more iterative.
So what is the point then at which because I imagine that you're working with some quite well-established procurement functions and procurement teams.
Yeah.
So what is the point at which the light bulb moment appears for that team and they say, actually, we want to try it the agile way? So we're going to get Mirko in to help us with this, because a lot of the issues around change and being brave and getting the outside perspective and doing things differently is you haven't got the space within the company structure or the team structure to do that. But also that level of outside investment, sometimes the procurement team will be like, well, okay, and I'm going to talk about it because it will be a question, who's going to pay for that? Because the procurement team don't have that massive budget. So how is that sold in? So, when working with your specific clients, how have you sort of handled that objection handling piece? How have you got in there to sort of say, from a value perspective, this is what you need, let us trial this with you and work with you and show you that there's a different way? I'm interested in, how you've landed that.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Several years back, I gave up trying to convince people. So that's the secret sauce. Huh? You get it for free. What we do is we inspire the people. So everybody in the audience can book me 1 hour for free if you're in a corporate. The only condition is you need to bring in all the people that are curious and also some guys from the leadership. And we're going to work out, your current challenges. I can share some cases, the ERP case I just mentioned and so forth. And then it just makes sense. It's that stupid, right? And people just got a bit of blind, don't get offended, but a bit blind, because we forgot to think outside of the box. And we often get called, there are two reasons. One is the business is bypassing us because they are in an agile transformation and somehow it doesn't fit anymore. We get more and more such requests and say, well, we need to get agile too. Or the COVID-19 crisis obviously was a huge trigger too, because procurement leaders realized that we are not working on a sustainable pace. We are burning our people. So there must be a better way. There are clever people, leaders in procurement, that realize that because of digitalization and optimization, they're about to lose their job, because what is digitalized, what can be digitalized will be digitalized, and what is left is the complex stuff, and they have no clue how to deal with it. So they are looking for new things. At the beginning, and it's still the case, we are often called, and it's a nice place to be, where the shit hits the fan. So there is a milestone. It's unachievable working the old way. There is a new regulatory change we need to cope up with, and so forth. And then they just realize we can't do it the old way. We need to do it somehow different.
I was going to ask you, is it always procurement people that bring you in, or is it actually you working into? It's mainly other business leaders that want to find a way to speed up the procurement process, I guess.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's different. So this ERP case, for example, it was the head of finance who said, I got infected by Agile. That's the way I want to do the delivery. So why not starting even before, right? Doing it in a more agile way. So sometimes it's the business. Sometimes it's procurement. Sometimes it's the supplier side to say, "Hey, this is complex." And more and more, it's the agile community.
Right.
So I'm currently writing a paper back there. It's 20% finished. It's a survival guide for leaders in procurement, and the title is "From Function to Capability." So now, what I'm saying now might sound scary, but if you think about 100% agile organized company, we are talking about cross-functional team of teams. There are no functions anymore. Yeah. We see this development already in huge companies out there, where there is no HR anymore. There is no finance. There is no, it's all delegated to the teams and team of teams organized around value. And a similar development we are observing and also predicting to procurement as a function. So almost everybody needs to get this capability, how to find, select, deal with partners, if you think it mid to long term. Yeah. So that's a great opportunity. Don't be scared. That's a great opportunity for procurement folks, because they could become evangelists and coaches and so forth to support their organization in doing complex stuff themselves. How weird is that?
I don't
So
think
it's more of a prediction now. So it's not.
Yeah,
We are seeing it.
I'm correct. Talk to most procurement functions. If you were to talk to teams, specifically in the world that I sit in, we want to do that. We are itching to have a new way of working. We are itching to be part of cross-functional teams. We are itching to have that accountability in place that goes across the business. We are itching to move from a cost-based discussion to a value-based discussion. It isn't that the individual people or community within procurement don't want to do that. I just feel that some of our very clunky processes and ways of working, we've got to be brave enough to say that isn't working anymore. If we were an engineering process, we would apply some continuous improvement here and look at what we need to do. And I still feel, and people will be sick of me saying this, that I don't think as a profession that we do that enough internally. We don't have that inspection and say, okay, how much easier or more fulfilling or quicker would my role be if I just could change 3 things today? And that starts with us.
I agree. Maybe just one thing to add. I agree. So what we usually do is we educate the people. So we with our certification classes, we give them inspiration. We give them new tools at hand. Then usually they do some pilots, like this ERP was a pilot. And then because in such a cross-functional team, you need almost everybody from the company. And what the people often think, that must be kind of a super agile company already. The opposite is the case. We are working with the least agile companies that just have a problem, right? And so that also inspires then other functions, and in last consequence, it leads to an agile transformation. So I completely agree that continuous improvement is important, but I think procurement currently is at the stage in time where they need a radical shift. So it's no more evolution, it's revolution.
That's
right. So not saying that we have done everything wrong in the past. That's not what I'm saying. So for the commodity stuff, we still should do it this way, right? But lucky us, we get rid of all this boring operational stuff, and the machine will take over, so that we could focus more on the more interesting strategic stuff, right?
And I think the point I was going to make is actually the procurement process is very outdated. It's very process centric, and business has changed. It is more relationship centric now. It's about innovation, and I think we lose that when we just strictly follow a process. So I think it's definitely revolution over evolution in terms of procurement processes for me.
And I'd imagine it's easier to have that discussion when you are a neutral person with some teams and functions and CPOs, etc. Just because you've got that your objective, you can be completely objective. You're not towing the party lines.
I agree. On the other hand, we are also in collaboration with big procurement organization where we started to train the trainers and coach the coaches to enable them to build up this capability, the way we think, the way we behave, the way we coach, so that they can take over our role. And everything else than that won't scale, right? And also in our pilot cases where we are supporting them, they need to do the work. So that's also slightly different to a traditional procurement consultant, right? Who give me all thing and I hide everything how I did it, so that you need to book me the next time again. No, we want to. I mean, at least our ambition doesn't always work out, but our ambition is that they could do it the next time themselves.
I like them. I like the vision. I'm really intrigued to see how it rolls out. And I think if you've already got advocates for change within the community, then that's a real positive.
Now we're getting to time, but so Mirko, if anyone wants to get involved in this movement, if anyone wants to do a bit more in terms of Lean Agile procurement, what do you recommend to them, and how can they contact you as well?
Yeah, so I'm not sure if you want to share in the comments the link to our portal, so
yeah, sure.
where you could find more information about the movement, about the approach, case studies, but also we started a community of trainers, so we now at least have all the continents. So we are looking for quality over quantity, so it's a small growth, but and all of those trainers, feel free to contact them. Obviously, you can also contact me. But if you're, watching this stream now from Australia, we have great colleagues over there. If you're in Russia or in the States, it's maybe more easy to chat with one of my colleagues over there.
Okay.
So yeah.
Great. Yeah, well, we'll stick that link into the comments, and yeah, this will be available as well as a podcast, and obviously on demand. You can come back to it and go on LinkedIn. So yeah, well, Mirko, thanks for joining us. Really appreciate you taking the time to talk us through Lean Agile procurement. It's been fascinating insight into that process. And yeah, as I say, check out the podcast. It's available on all platforms, and join us next time when we'll be tackling another big issue facing procurement. Yeah. Until then, goodbye.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks for having me. And yeah, just get the right people together. As simple as that.
All right. Thank you. Cheers. Bye now.